In the second year of my marriage to my wife Sophia, I regretted my decision. She had delicate features, long legs, a soft waist, a firm chest and round hips, but her ambition to succeed was so great that it touched my bottom line. Facing her repeated lies, I gradually became silent from believing. People in the company laughed at me for being honest behind my back and nicknamed me Big Turtle. Finally, I gave up. After signing the divorce agreement, I took out my cell phone and called a number I hadn't contacted for a long time. I heard a barrage of curses on the phone. "Stop talking, Elle has received a death order, I can't give you a penny." I sighed and said, "Tell my father that I want to go home." Before long, countless luxury cars came towards us like a long glowing chain. Later, my wife called my phone again and again, her voice choking with sobs. "Honey, there is a bad guy in the bed, I'm scared." The story is about to begin. If you like it, remember to like and subscribe. Earlier, General Manager David called his wife to the office for a meeting and pulled down the window blinds. The company chat group immediately started to discuss the issue. That's outrageous. Why can a meeting only be held by two people? Those who understand will understand. With Sophia's enchanting face, which man wouldn't be moved? Okay, everyone, stop teasing. What's wrong with saying a few words? The Big Turtle isn't in the group anyway. He's in the group. My colleagues looked at me sideways, with sympathy and more ridicule in their eyes. I felt very uncomfortable. My wife Sophia has explained to me more than once that I should not misunderstand and should not pay attention to those rumors. But this time, I wanted to go in and see what was going on. I strode towards the office, my colleagues followed me closely with surprised eyes. The male assistant stopped me at the door and said in an unquestionable tone, "Mr. David has something important to do, and no one is allowed to disturb him." He pronounced the word important in a sarcastic tone. I was too lazy to talk to him and pushed the door open. I saw my wife sitting on the sofa, her face still a little red. "James, what's wrong with you?" David turned his back, walked back to his desk, and accused me, "Don't you know to knock on the door before you have to? With this level of quality and this mentality, you still want a raise?" I unclenched my clenched fists and said expressionlessly, "Yes, you are very broad-minded. You call everyone dad when you meet them." David was furious and picked up the thermos on the table and threw it at me. I dodged it and stared at my wife and yelled, "Sophia, come out." In the company lounge, Sophia looked up at me with a guilty look and scratched my palm. She said aggrievedly, "Honey, I'm about to be promoted, can you stop making trouble?" I shook her hand off and asked coldly, "Why did you lie to me?" She shuddered, lowered her head and whispered, "I didn't lie to you." I raised my hand and pinched Sophia's chin, forcing her to look up and meet my eyes. I said coldly, "You keep saying that he's not interested in you, but his belt was loose just now?" She pursed her lips again and again, her face looking a little confused. "To be honest, I'm really tired." Instead of waiting here in silence for her to make up excuses, I might as well just say, "Sophia, let's get a divorce. There are only 0 times and countless times of cheating and lying. I can't trust you anymore." Sophia stroked the hair beside her ears and said with disgust, "Yes, I lied to you. David was indeed interested in me, and I lied just to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. A woman's blooming period is very short. If you insist on getting a divorce, how are you going to compensate me for the time I wasted on you?" Sophia finally spoke her mind. "We fell in love in college and got married, but in her eyes, being with me was just a waste of time." I knew she was very strong-willed. Whether in the student union or at various events, she had to be the most dazzling one. Even now that she has entered the workplace, Sophia has not hesitated to use this method to quickly get promoted. Now, I can no longer guess how much truth there is in her words. "James, apart from being poor, you are indeed a perfect man, both in appearance and figure. So, I am willing to give you another chance. Tell me, are you serious about getting a divorce?" Sophia curled her lips with a faint smile on her face. She looked like she had me in her hands again. It was clearly Sophia who made an unforgivable mistake, yet she still gave me a chance. The 3 letters PUA suddenly appeared in my mind. "I'm serious." I raised my head and looked at her, then said seriously, "Instead of living in fear that you'll cheat on me every day, it's better to just break up. After all, without me, you can relax more." The smile on Sophia's face slowly froze. She observed me for a while before she opened her red lips and said angrily, "James, you don't have to be so petty." I shook my head speechlessly and insisted on getting the divorce certificate today. At this time, David pushed open the door of the lounge and walked in with his head held high. "Ms. Sophia, divorce him. James acts like a rich man every day, and his pockets are cleaner than his face. I will talk to the HR department and you will be the director. We will go to open champagne tonight to celebrate." He looked at Sophia with brighter eyes, stretched out his hand and naturally put his arm around her shoulders, and then said, "He doesn't cherish you, but there are many men who do. Don't be afraid, I support you." And Sophia didn't dodge, but nodded gratefully. I was so angry that I laughed. She suddenly became so strange. "Since you gave me the ring, I will give you all my loyalty and passion." This promise was made by Sophia herself. It turns out that everyone changes. When I met David's provocative eyes, my possessiveness and unwillingness began to take over again, even though I had already decided to divorce him. "Sophia, as long as you slap him, resign and follow me, I will pretend that what happened today never happened." I looked at her expectantly and continued, "As long as you are willing, I will forgive the past. Besides, it will be the 3rd year of our marriage soon, and the agreed deadline is coming soon, so I can take her home." David seemed to have heard a great joke and laughed so hard that he doubled over, holding his stomach. Sophia frowned, with a hint of disgust in her eyes, and said with disdain, "James, why are you still not awake? Do you know the market value of this company? Do you know what my starting annual salary is as a director? Forget it, let's get a divorce. You are too short-sighted, we are not from the same world." Listening to Sophia's words, my heart sank. David clapped his hands in agreement and said with a smile, "Let's go now. I'll take you two to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get your divorce certificates." I grabbed Sophia's wrist and pulled her towards me, and David immediately moved his hands and pushed me against the wall. He shouted at me angrily, "Touch her again, you little bastard." I grabbed David's collar and tightened my grip, instantly pinning him against the wall. I said coldly, "As long as we haven't divorced, she's still my wife, why can't I touch her? As for you, I give you face and call you Mr. David. If I don't give you face, who the hell are you, shouting at me here?" Sophia rushed over with a terrified look in her eyes, and ordered me to let go. "James, let go. If you dare to hurt David, your life will be over." Of course I know what Sophia means. He can become the general manager at such a young age, just because his family has some background. But the more I look at David's face, the more I hate it. What should I do? I took out a pen from my pocket. He struggled, and I hit him in the lower body with my knee. David screamed in pain, arched his body and cursed me, "James, you bastard, you dare to hit me. Do you know who my father is?" I used my thumb to push open the pen cap and wrote "stupid" on the left side of his face and "egg" on the right side. I wrote very heavily and drops of blood appeared on his fair and tender face. He screamed even louder. Sophia finally panicked and shouted for help without caring about her image. My colleagues rushed in and pulled me aside. "Oh my God, Mr. David, are you okay? Quick, quick, get a tissue and wet the water. Come on, make way, I'll move the chair over for Mr. David to sit on." Everyone looked fawning, making the scene a little funny. What I found most ironic was that Sophia stood in the middle of the crowd, gently held David's face, and put her lips close to him to blow on the red spots on his face. My heart seemed to be gripped by something. I was angry and numb. In the end, I felt nothing at all. After a long while, Sophia squeezed out of the crowd, stared at me coldly and said, "You were such a brainless person. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau now." During the divorce process, she didn't say a word, just kept urging the staff to hurry up. After getting the certificate, Sophia immediately took a photo and posted it on WeChat Moments, as if she was relieved. Suddenly she looked up and said to me, "James, whether you believe it or not, I have never regretted marrying you. But after all, we are not on the same path." Sophia hurriedly took a taxi and left. I opened my phone and saw that she had posted a photo of her divorce certificate without any caption. However, many people in her circle congratulated her, saying things like "the goddess has been reborn." Especially her brother, who gave her 3 thumbs up in a row. "Sister, this is really great. You finally divorced that rubbish James." I suddenly felt like a fool and started to think about the past. Sophia and I were so in love at the beginning, why did it turn out like this? After we graduated from college, we got married after finding jobs. It was so cozy to live in a small house. Every night we went to bed and hugged each other sweetly. Sophia liked to plan our future, talking about how much money she would make and how cute a baby she would give me in the future. I really wanted to tell her that if she just waited for 3 years, the best things in the world would be hers as long as she asked for them. But I swore a solemn oath and could not tell her. At this moment, I closed my moments, opened the number in my address book that I hadn't contacted for a long time, and called it. An impatient voice came from the phone, "Hey, kid, don't say anything, it's impossible. I dare not give you a penny." I was silent for a moment, then said tiredly, "Mr. Thomas, I'm divorced. Tell my dad, I want to go home." There was silence for a while, and then the voice became respectful and serious, and responded loudly, "Okay, Mr. James. I will send someone to pick you up after I verify it. After Sophia and I got together in college, I carefully tried to discuss marriage with my dad. He was so angry that he smashed an antique worth 800,000 US dollars, stood up and slapped me twice, and said angrily, "Stupid. Who are you? Is Sophia worthy of you? Let's not talk about other things. Olivia's family and I are old friends. We swore to be in-laws in this life. If you do this, do you still want to keep my old face? You can just play around, find a star, find an internet celebrity, give a breakup fee, I don't care, but you can't be serious." I spat out a mouthful of blood foam, clenched my fists and told him firmly, "No, I want to marry Sophia." My father frowned, looked out the window, and sighed deeply. My heart skipped a beat, thinking he had compromised. Unexpectedly, he turned around and slapped me twice, saying viciously, "Rebellious son, you rebellious son. I can tell what kind of person you are at a glance. If you have no money or power, with her looks, can you protect her?" I nodded firmly again and said, "Time will tell the truth." Finally, my father and I made a 3-year agreement. I would give up my identity as the second generation rich of the James family, not take a penny with me, and become an ordinary person, busy with 3 meals a day. As long as the salary is in place, the machine will be scrapped. He will not use his power to interfere with me, and I will never ask him for help when I encounter difficulties. As long as I marry Sophia for 3 years and still love her as before, he will recognize her as his daughter-in-law. It's almost been 3 years. From the beginning, I noticed something was not right between her and David. In Sophia's chat history, David was like a fox in heat, with hidden meanings in every word. Sophia swore to me that it was definitely not what I thought. For this, Sophia even said that David was a gay, and I believed her. In order to apologize to Sophia, I even spent all my saved salary to give her an entry-level Hermes. Sophia received the gift and smiled reluctantly. I thought Sophia felt sorry for me spending money, but later I found out that she had a more expensive bag hidden in her car. I went home, packed my things, and threw them all, including my keys, into the trash can downstairs. On the side of the road, several luxury cars were speeding by, and the harsh friction sound rang in my ears. "Mr. Thomas came so quickly? Isn't it still a few hours away from New York?" Several sturdy strangers got out of the car. The leader was chewing gum, looking at his phone, then at me, and said happily, "This is the guy Mr. David is looking for. Drag him away." On the top floor of the building, the music was blasting and the neon lights were cutting my sight. On the sofa by the pool, David was sitting with his legs crossed, one hand on Sophia's thigh and the other holding a cigarette. Sophia tilted her head with a charming smile on her face. I was pushed in front of them by a few strong men, looking a little embarrassed. David took a long puff of his cigarette and said slowly, "I never take revenge overnight, for fear of affecting my sleep." Sophia put down the wine glass in her hand and looked at me with an ambiguous look. She was wearing the latest high-end velvet dress with one shoulder, and her facial features were exquisite and dazzling. No one expected that I would ignore David's words and look at Sophia and say, "You look good, ex-wife. You even put on such beautiful makeup." Sophia was slightly stunned and quickly avoided my eyes. David, on the other hand, became even more angry. He stood up and pointed at the pile of wine glasses on the table, and said viciously, "James, it's very simple. Just drink all the wine in one breath and forget about our relationship. After all, we are about to have sex with the same woman. There are some things I want to talk to you about, huh?" I took a look at the wine on the table. Anyone who dared to drink it all would have died of alcohol poisoning if he was sent to the hospital a second later. Of course, there is another option. He shook the cigarette ash onto his leather shoes and said arrogantly, "Why are my shoes dirty? You kneel down and lick them clean for me, and that's fair. How do you think?" I picked up the glass of champagne and drank it all, then said disdainfully, "Do you like other people's wives so much? Do you want me to give you a cheap son?" David's face suddenly changed, he turned his head and looked at Sophia, and they were completely at odds. He roared angrily, "James, you coward, you still have the courage to pretend with me? Yes, that's right, I like your wife, and she is willing. Really, that taste is very exciting." Sophia's ears turned red, she pursed her lips and added, "James and I have nothing to do with each other now." Seeing that the tension was rising, David's men behind me grabbed my shoulders tightly to prevent me from making any moves. David let out a long breath and looked at me playfully. The next second, he lifted Sophia's chin and leaned over to kiss her lips. Sophia trembled a few times and responded stiffly. "That's enough," I said dully. David stopped what he was doing, turned to look at me and said, "Hey, you shouldn't have let her divorce you so early, otherwise you would have been cheated on. How about this, I invite you to watch me and Sophia having sex tonight. To be honest, it's impossible for me not to be angry." But from what David said, Sophia didn't do that before the divorce. But her choice was only a matter of time. I hope she won't regret it. Tonight, I also hope that I won't have any regrets. I quickly broke away from the two people behind me, and with great anger, I smashed the bottle on the table onto David's head. I said angrily, "I don't say anything, do you think I'm afraid? Do you really think you are a wolf and so arrogant?" While no one was reacting, I kneed him hard in the abdomen with great force. David fell limply on the sofa and said through gritted teeth, "Hush. Go ahead, beat me to death." The scene was in chaos. The woman in the pool screamed and got up and ran around. Many thugs came from all directions. I think David was well prepared today. Even though I had practiced a few moves, I was quickly defeated. After being hit by a few punches, I turned and ran in the direction of David. He was just there to watch the show, and he was so shocked that he yelled, "What a bunch of rubbish! Hurry up and catch him." I wanted to take David hostage and retreat, but Sophia calmly took a step forward to block him, looked at me coldly and said, "James, stop it." "Stop?" I looked at her with a sneer, and then asked, "Do you know that I might die here tonight?" She raised her eyebrows in confusion, looked at me and said, "Can you put aside your male pride? I begged David for a long time before he agreed to forgive you. Why are you so ungrateful?" The footsteps behind me were getting closer and closer, and I raised my hands high. She didn't hide, but bit her lip and closed her eyes, determined not to give way. Just as I was stunned, something exploded above my head and there was a roar in my ears. The next second, I was kicked into the swimming pool and choked on the water. I swam to the shore, which was already full of thugs. David was helped to the front, spit into the pool, and said with red eyes, "If you can destroy him for me, I will pay you 10 times the money. If anything goes wrong, I will take the blame. James, I want you to spend the rest of your life in a wheelchair counting the days until you die." With a few splashes, someone jumped down, splashing water everywhere. I endured the pain and climbed up. I was pushed by several thugs and stumbled for several steps, and suddenly bumped into a soft chest. "Stay away from me, you're all wet." It was a woman. I was so wet that I even wet some of her clothes. She took a step back in disgust, then sighed helplessly. The next second, she took my hand and ran towards the top floor exit. I noticed that 5 or 6 bodyguards, who were about 1.9 meters tall, were covering our retreat. After running down 2 floors, she finally let go of my hand and murmured, "What did I tell you in the beginning? I told you not to learn martial arts. You have strong limbs but a simple mind. You got beaten like a fool." I touched my head awkwardly and responded, "Thanks for today." She pressed the elevator button, her eyes twinkling, with a naughty smile, "No need to thank me, we are friends." This made me feel a bit embarrassed. The pretty woman in front of me, who looked a bit dorky and gullible, was named Olivia. We had known each other since we were kids, and you could say we were childhood sweethearts. Her father and my father had sworn an oath of blood to become in-laws, and they insisted that the two of us have a child to combine the best qualities of our two families. However, Olivia had been as mischievous as a monkey since she was a child. She loved to bully and beat me up, and the crucial thing was that I couldn't even defeat her. I learned martial arts just to get back at her and vent my anger. Unexpectedly, when I returned after mastering martial arts, she had been sent abroad. When we met again, our two families were discussing our engagement, and they even spent over $100,000 to consult a feng shui master to pick an auspicious day. But at that time, I already had feelings for Sophia. When Olivia found out, she didn't say much. Instead, she chased me down 3 streets with a tang dao. In the end, she straddled me, but she couldn't bring herself to hurt me. Instead, she took out her phone and transferred a red packet of 200 yuan as a blessing to me, and told me to get lost. At this moment, I met Olivia here, and I was still in such an embarrassing situation. My toes were clenched tightly, and I wanted to find a hole to crawl into. But fortunately, meeting Olivia here should be a coincidence. She probably doesn't know what is happening to me now. You owe me such a big favor today. What's the point of just saying thank you? Do something practical and give me a few $1,000,000? Olivia blinked her big eyes, took out a tissue and a pen from her pink bag, pressed them against the wall and started writing the IOU. I was stunned for a moment, then said with a wry smile, I deserve it. I accept it. If it weren't for her, I don't know how miserable I would be today. It seems like I forgot a zero. Alas, I'm not good at math. I'll give you a good deal. Please sign it. Olivia handed me the written IOU. I took the tissue. The beautiful black regular script was a little blurred, but it clearly said 10 million US dollars. In order to prevent me from cheating, the date was even specifically marked and written for me. I didn't say anything, signed the form, and gave it back to Olivia. She smiled with satisfaction, showing a pair of cute dimples, and pointed to the elevator door. I walked into the elevator side by side with her, and she suddenly asked, "Just now, did your wife kiss someone else?" The elevator number was ticking. I was so embarrassed that I didn't know what to do. I lowered my head and said and added, "Not my wife. We're divorced." Oh, Olivia's voice was soft to begin with, and it had a very long tail. I held my forehead, raised my eyes and looked directly at Olivia's red face and said, "Olivia, laugh if you want to." Unexpectedly, Olivia's expression changed. She frowned and raised her hand to touch my head gently. She said to me with a distressed tone, "I know you are very sad. You gave up being a rich second generation and went to fight for an answer. It's a pity that the investment of feelings is not sincere and will not have results. James, you can cry if you want." I was stunned for a moment, feeling a little bitter. Unexpectedly, Olivia's tone became playful again, and she said jokingly, "Am I right, Turtle?" I instantly got angrier again. This woman was just here to make fun of me. The elevator reached the first floor, and I strode out. Olivia followed me out with a smile. When we got to the side of the road, she dinged her bright yellow sports car and said, "Want me to drive you? It's free." The car light shone on Olivia's wet white short sleeves, revealing some of her outlines. I turned around and responded, "No thanks." Olivia reacted quickly, jumped into the car, honked at me twice and said, "Okay, I'm leaving first. Remember to give me money when you get home." My eyes fell on Olivia's red ears, and I thought that she might have come here just for me, so I asked her directly. Olivia pursed her lips and explained calmly, "What beautiful dream are you thinking about?" "I am here with my boyfriend. He is here to shoot an outdoor commercial. He is a big star and super handsome." I waved and took a taxi to the hotel. I called Mr. Thomas and said in a cold tone, "There is a man named David. Buy out his company as quickly as possible and find out his background and connections. I want to get him." Mr. Thomas told me that my dad had gone abroad on a private jet to discuss business and would not be back for the time being. My dad had verified the news of my divorce, released me from the blacklist, and sent me 3 60-second voice messages. I didn't dare to listen and clicked the language to text conversion. As expected, he cursed me so much that the fonts were garbled. He said that I was born a fool, and other children have been living a high-spirited life in recent years, but I have been having mental illnesses every day these days. He told me to go abroad to see a brain doctor who specializes in treating love brain. He sighed deeply, lifted the restrictions on me, and finally said something that made me sad and helpless. "Son, there is no use for Dad to ask anything of you. As long as you live a peaceful life, that's enough." The next day I woke up from the soft bed in the hotel. It felt like it was a dream. When I woke up, that person remained in the dream forever. Mr. Thomas told me that the matter was settled, and I stretched my muscles and returned to the company. This time I walked into the company gate with the mentality of not going there to work. My colleagues who were typing away on their keyboards saw that it was me and stood up one by one. "James, how dare you come here? Hurry up and pack up and leave." "Yes, James is so shameless, get out." They spoke louder and louder, hoping that David in the office could hear their voices and make a good impression. I smiled faintly and walked to the office door. David was anxiously answering the phone. David frowned and said with a depressed expression, "Are you sick? I invested in a small goal in the company, and you want me to give out $5 million as an apology? No, at least tell me who I offended." "What? Someone in New York? I haven't been there. I really didn't cause any trouble. I can swear on it." Sophia thoughtfully brought him a cup of coffee, but he was busy answering the phone and pushed it randomly, and the coffee and the broken cup were scattered all over the floor. She squatted down slowly in silence, and only then noticed me standing at the door. "Don't pick it up. Be careful not to cut your hand." When I said this, I was shocked myself. Habit is really a scary thing. Sophia stood up, with a complex look in her eyes, and said calmly, "I'll give you some money, so don't make trouble." David glanced at me, nodded and hung up the phone in a hurry, then walked towards me with his legs splayed, wanting to attack me, and said arrogantly, "Little bastard, I was just asking someone to find you. It's so funny, you came here on your own." I rolled up my sleeves, and he shrank his neck in fear, not daring to throw his fist. The colleagues outside kept their eyes on the office and wanted to put their ears against the door. I walked a few steps and sat in David's boss chair, playing with the grinding wheel of the lighter. The chair was indeed very comfortable. I looked up and found that Sophia had been looking at David. I knew clearly what was in her eyes. She didn't love someone like that. I said with a playful expression, "Sophia, is this what you want?" David looked unhappy and picked up his phone to call people. At this moment, many people suddenly came into the company, all wearing black suits, both men and women. The beautiful secretary who was walking in front and looked like a queen stopped in front of David with a contract in her hand. The beautiful secretary said in a cold tone, "Sign." David gritted his teeth, trembling as he took out a pen and quickly wrote his name. The secretary nodded with satisfaction, walked up to me, bent down slightly and handed it to me with both hands. "Mr. James, the transfer contract is ready, please take a look." David stood up and pointed at me, asking the secretary in surprise, "What the hell, you called him a bastard, Mr. James? Is your eye okay, beautiful?" The beautiful secretary rolled her eyes and ignored him, but continued to say to me, "Mr. James, Mr. Kevin is hosting a dinner tonight and wants to invite you to dinner. I want to apologize to you." David jumped 3 feet high and said in disbelief, "Fuck, my dad will treat him to a meal? Which crew are you from?" Sophia seemed to feel ashamed, poked my shoulder, and said softly, "As a couple, you don't have to save face. You have to live your life in the future." I signed, closed the contract, and told the secretary with a cold expression, "Okay, replace everything in the company with new ones, and tear down this office as well." The beautiful secretary nodded and said obediently, "Okay, I'll do it now." David seemed to feel something was wrong, so he picked up his phone and called his dad. Less than a minute later, David hung up the phone and looked at me with a look of shock. He pushed Sophia in front of me, his tone softened, and begged, "No, brother, you are just pretending to be a pig to eat the tiger. If you had told me your identity earlier, I would never have dared to snatch this woman from you. Is it too late for me to apologize now? This woman is not worth $35 million US. Sophia looked at me puzzledly, then at David. David looked as if he had eaten a fly, and spoke very quickly. "Didn't I tell you at the dinner table that there was a rich second generation in New York? Wasn't that idiot willing to work as a wage earner for 3 years for a woman? He is that rich second generation." In order to get his father to recognize this daughter-in-law, he made such a legendary story at the time that the pure love god of war fell to the ground. I was really impressed. My idol was in front of me, but I didn't recognize him. Look at what he has done. David took out a cigarette and held it in front of me, saying in a flattering manner, "Brother, calm down, it's all a misunderstanding. I haven't touched her yet. The kick you gave me last night made me impotent. I have to go for a checkup today." David is indeed a man who can bend, but unfortunately, no matter how well he acts, the resentment in his eyes still betrays him. I didn't take the cigarette, frowned and said, "Don't shout nonsense. With your status, you don't even have the qualifications to talk to me. Take all your subordinates and get out of here." His body stiffened for a moment, and he showed a false smile and said flatteringly, "Okay, brother, I'll leave now." Sophia and I were the only ones left in the office. She put away her surprised expression, her throat tightened a little, and she looked at me with resentment and said, "You treat me like a fool, is that fun?" I said, "I couldn't explain it before, and there's no need to explain it now." Sophia's eyes were fixed on my face, as if she wanted to see through me, and she said with red eyes, "It turns out that you loved me so much and gave up so much for me. I missed it." Her tears slid down at the right time, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. I turned my head away, stared at the lighter in my hand, and said calmly, "As husband and wife, I won't target you, but I can't let David go." She took a step forward towards me, and suddenly the door was pushed open, and a figure ran very fast and pounced on me. The next second, my neck was circled and a pair of soft lips blocked me. Ugh! I held down my attacker, and after seeing his appearance, I said somewhat speechlessly, "Olivia, what are you doing?" Olivia suddenly buried her head in my neck and said softly, "Thank you, Brother James, for the check for $10 million US. I will listen to you in the future." The door slammed shut and Sophia left angrily. Olivia exhaled, then fluttered to her feet from me, wiped her mouth, and said mischievously, "Help in times of emergency, be careful of green tea." I smiled, looked at her lovingly and said, "Thank you for listening to me." Olivia glanced at me secretly and said a little embarrassedly, "She kissed another man in front of you first, and I helped you vent your anger. This is called giving someone a taste of their own medicine. Don't thank me, be practical. That's a huge sacrifice for you." I suddenly remembered something and reminded her silently, "Don't do this next time. You have a boyfriend." She scratched her head for a while, picked up her bag, said none of your business and left. She really came and went like the wind. Messages on my phone kept ringing, and the small company group that had kicked me out pulled me back in. "Mr. James, you have such a strong background, please accept my knee. Mr. James is so low-key and easygoing, handsome and powerful, and his work ability is also top-notch. I can't believe I am so lucky that you are my boss." A group of fence-sitters, and it is precisely because of this that they can more easily hold their positions in various complex environments. Having experienced the sadness of working, I suddenly felt a little emotional. I left the company and saw a long line of luxury cars parked on the street. The lights of the cars were flashing brightly, as if welcoming me home. The driver opened the door for me, and I sat in the car, looking at the starry skylights above my head. It was a strange yet familiar feeling. I opened the car's wine cabinet and poured a glass of wine. I hadn't drunk it for a long time, and I choked a little. A yellow-haired young man on the side of the road was taking photos crazily with his phone, shouting loudly, "Sister, does your new brother-in-law have this car at home? Look at the big gold logo and the handsome body." I lowered the window a little, and the yellow-haired man happened to meet my eyes. His pupils trembled. "Hey, I am dazzled, the man in the car looks like that loser James." Sophia pulled him aside, not daring to look at me, and said in a muffled voice, "Stop talking." After returning to the villa arranged by Mr. Thomas and having dinner, an old man stood at the gate. He bowed and put the gift on the ground. "Mr. James, I am here to apologize to you on behalf of my son." I glanced behind him, and there was no one there. He explained with a nervous look on his face, "My son is in the hospital. He has a penis injury. The doctor said it's serious and might affect his fertility. Look at what happened. It's obviously all a misunderstanding. I'm going back to New York tomorrow." He thanked me gratefully after hearing this. "Thank you, Mr. James, for your kindness. I, an old man, will not bother you anymore." After the door closed, my cell phone rang frantically. It was Sophia. On the phone, Sophia said softly, "Are you there? James, there seems to be a thief in my house. I dare not move. I am so scared, what should I do? It seems like someone is hiding in the quilt of the bed. What should I do if they come to rob? Can you come to my place and rescue me, husband?" I held the phone, deleted the words I had typed, and wondered why she hadn't called the police. Suddenly, I looked at the words in the dialogue box and realized that she seemed to be under some kind of coercion. I picked up my coat and asked Mr. Thomas to call someone. All the way, Mr. Thomas hesitated and hesitated to speak. I said helplessly, "Don't worry, she and I will never have any contact again." Mr. Thomas then breathed a sigh of relief. I walked to the house where Sophia and I used to live. It was quiet all around, eerily quiet. Suddenly some people rushed out and started fighting. At this time, a shrill cry was heard, "Don't worry about anything else, just destroy James for me." The scene suddenly became chaotic. Mr. Thomas asked someone to escort me to the car. I called the police in the car and said, "David is playing dirty tricks on me. I have to make trouble for you." Sophia's panicked face appeared outside the window. She moved her lips but I couldn't hear clearly. I opened the car door and found that her arm was bleeding. Sophia pointed to the black van across the street and said weakly, "Ms. Olivia, it seems that she was caught in the car by David." I thought to myself that this was not good, and I rushed over without thinking too much. I opened the car door, and there was no one inside. Turning back, Sophia was standing in the distance with tears streaming down her face. She cried, "I'm sorry, James, I didn't want you to come, but he caught my brother." The roar of the engine made it difficult for me to hear what she said next. The next second, the blinding high beams rushed towards me, and my eyes were almost blinded by the bright lights. I felt a woman rushing in front of me. She rushed over, hugged me, and fell backwards, rolling on the ground for several times. There was a loud crash, and my ears rang for a while before I came to my senses. Sophia was covered in blood and had passed out. Just now, it was Sophia who pounced on me. I looked up and my heart skipped a beat. I saw a yellow sports car crashing into the waist of the black car, forcing it against the guardrail. Both cars were overturned on the ground, and the pungent smell of gasoline made me forget to breathe for a moment. I rushed to the door of the yellow sports car like crazy. The airbags had all been deployed. Olivia's eyelids were bleeding, her eyes were a little blurry, and she murmured, "Help, be careful." My heart felt like it was pierced by something sharp. I hugged Olivia down and kept calling her name. David climbed out of another car, staggered towards me, and shouted frantically, "Mr. James, even if God comes today, he can't stop me from killing you today." I kicked him in the chest, and he lay on the ground gasping for breath like a dog. He looked at God with a painful expression. "You crippled me, and my dad actually said I deserved it. No, I won't accept it." Police cars stopped by the road one after another, and their presence put a stop to the premeditated fight. David and his men were arrested, and his father took out a letter of severance signed in blood, saying that he had nothing to do with the relationship. Sophia was originally in the same hospital as Olivia, but somehow the doctor said there were some issues that needed to be checked out, so Sophia was transferred to another hospital. My dad and Olivia's father rushed to the hospital. Before I could stand, my dad slapped me in the face and said to me angrily, "You still need a woman to protect you, how stupid. I'm going to send you back to school." Olivia's father stopped my dad, who was about to explode, and it took him a long time to calm him down. Olivia's father walked up to me and slapped me harder. "You are such a jerk. How are you going to compensate my daughter?" Olivia stood at the door and yelled "Dad" in dissatisfaction. I quickly walked over to Olivia to check her injuries. Olivia raised her hand to press her hair and said softly, "It's okay, I just had a superficial injury. My car has upgraded its safety system, so you have to compensate me." I looked at Olivia and said lovingly, "Okay, I'll pay for it." Her cheeks puffed up slightly, her pretty eyes narrowed, and she blushed as she said, "Ouch, my head hurts. Help me get on the bed." I carefully held Olivia's shoulders and walked inside. I called the doctor to take another look, and I breathed a sigh of relief only after he confirmed that everything was fine. Outside the ward, my dad said bluntly, "I've asked someone to arrange for Sophia to be transferred to another hospital. Mr. Thomas said that if she hadn't pushed you, you would have had to stay in bed for a while. I'll take care of Sophia's affairs. Anyway, you two shouldn't meet again in the future." I didn't answer. My dad hit me on the back of my head and said sternly, "Speak up, I'm talking to you, what are you thinking about? Olivia is injured, her boyfriend should at least come to see her no matter how busy he is, right?" I shook my head and said, "That person is not good. I have to persuade her." My dad looked extremely unhappy, breathing heavily through his nostrils. He raised his hand and wanted to hit me again, but finally said helplessly, "Silly. Forget it, I won't scold you. Where did Olivia get a boyfriend? As soon as you got married, she went abroad for training. Not long after she returned, she got the news of your divorce from Mr. Thomas and drove 5 hours to come to find you." Without waiting for my dad to finish, I pushed the door open and entered the ward. Olivia looked up blankly, raised the apple in her hand, looked at me blankly and said, "What's wrong, turtle? Why are your eyes red?" I took a few steps forward, bent down, and hugged Olivia. She froze and said with a chuckle, "Hey, hugging is useless, you have to pay. Compensation, all is yours." I didn't let go and held her tighter. Olivia's voice became softer and softer. She pinched my waist with one hand and continued, "That's not enough. If you like working so much, you should work for me. 3 years is not enough. 6 years, humph." I nodded desperately. The two old men standing at the door looked at me without hesitation, with awkward smiles on their faces. In fact, these slaps were not unjust. I once missed a ray of light, and I have to chase the sun for the rest of my life. After going through all this, I feel like I have been reborn. I once gave up everything for love and was willing to give up my comfortable life to become an ordinary person, thinking that sincerity would be exchanged for sincerity, but I didn't expect that reality would be so cruel. But it was also these experiences that made me see some people clearly and re-examine my own life. After Sophia was discharged from the hospital, I didn't see her again. I heard that she left the city and went to a new place to start a new life. I didn't hate her, but I occasionally thought of the time we spent together. Those memories, which were intertwined with beauty and pain, were like a dream. After waking up, only a faint feeling remained. After Olivia recovered from her injury, she became even more clingy. Olivia always asked me to accompany her for various reasons, whether it was shopping, watching movies, or eating. Sometimes I felt that Olivia was troublesome, but looking at her bright smile, I couldn't say no. One day, Olivia took me to a party. At the party, Olivia was like a happy little bird, shuttling among the crowd, while I sat quietly by the side, watching her. Suddenly, she ran over, took my hand and said, "Come on, I'll introduce someone to you." Olivia pulled me in front of a middle-aged man. Olivia smiled and said, "Dad, this is James, the one I told you about." I realized that this was Olivia's father. I quickly extended my hand and said politely, "Hello, Olivia's father." Olivia's father looked me up and down and said with a smile, "Not bad, you are more energetic than I thought. I was worried that you would be devastated by your emotional problems." I smiled awkwardly, "I'm sorry to have embarrassed you, uncle. I'm fine now." Olivia's father patted my shoulder and said, "Young man, it's good to experience some setbacks. You still have a long way to go. I think you are quite courageous. You gave up everything for that girl back then, and now you can stand up again. Olivia has been willful since she was a child. If she bullies you in the future, don't be afraid, just tell me." Before I could answer, Olivia took her father's arm and said coquettishly, "Dad, what are you talking about? How could I bully him? It's him who always bullies me." As she said that, Olivia looked at me with pretended grievance. Olivia's father laughed and said happily, Okay, I don't care about your young people's affairs. But James, if you treat Olivia badly, I won't forgive you." I nodded seriously, "Uncle, don't worry, I will treat her well. After the party, Olivia leaned on my shoulder and whispered, "James, you know what? I have liked you since we were little, but you only had someone else in your heart at that time. But fortunately, now you finally belong to me." I looked at her, and a warm feeling welled up in my heart. I said seriously, "Olivia, I was wrong and missed you before. But from now on, I will never let you down again." Olivia raised her head and asked with a twinkle in her eyes, "Really? Then you have to keep your word." "Of course." After saying that, I gently kissed her forehead. As time went by, I took over some of the family business, and with the experience I gained over the past few years, I was able to do it successfully. Olivia was also by my side, supporting and encouraging me. One day, I took Olivia back to the small house where Sophia and I had lived. The house had a new owner and everything around it had changed. I stood at the door, recalling every little detail of the past, and my heart no longer had the pain and regrets of the past. Olivia seemed to sense my emotions. She held my hand and said, "Don't think about it. The past is the past. Now you have me, and we will have a better future." I nodded, looked at Olivia and said, "Yes, we will have a better future." When I left, I didn't look back. Because I knew that my future was ahead, with the girl who had always been with me. And that experience was like a chapter that had been turned over in a book. Although there were twists and turns and pain, it also made me grow and made me cherish everything I have now. A few years later, Olivia and I had a grand wedding. At the wedding, as I watched her walk slowly toward me in her pure white wedding dress, I knew that I had finally found my own happiness. Our love may not be so romantic and tortuous, but it is real and warm. With the blessings of our relatives and friends, we made a lifelong commitment. I believe that in the days ahead, no matter what difficulties and challenges we encounter, we can go through them hand in hand, because we love and trust each other. And that story will always be a memory in my life, which I will remember and make me know how to cherish the people in front of me. This story ends here. If you like it, remember to share it with your friends. Your support is my greatest motivation.